So yes, the agenda for today's workshop is to learn about the fundamentals of what being a counsellor is, hear from two fantastic women who are already doing it, and we'll have a question and answer session to ask any questions you have for the guest speakers or for myself or Rosie or David. So, and to learn more about your next steps and how our teams can help support you along that way. So, f first off, we're going to explore what does a council do and what does a councillor do. So first off, the council. Um, Councils link to nearly every aspect of our lives and are responsible for a range of services such as education, care, waste management, cultural services, and planning. Scottish local government consists of 32 elected councils, which are known as local authorities. Each local authority is different in size and population and operates independently of the central government, and each local authority is accountable to the local people for the services they provide. Local authorities are so important because they deliver the vast majority of public services in their local area and provide that community leadership. And as you can see on the screen, here are just some of the responsibilities of local authorities. It's definitely not an exhaustive list. So, such as primary and secondary schooling, nurseries, care of the elderly, protection of vulnerable children and adults, landlord regulation, public parks, council leisure centres, swimming pools, some forms of community transport, maintenance of roads and pavements, non-commercial bus services, cultural services, the Scottish Welfare Fund, parking, and refuse collection and disposal. So that's already a long list, and that's not even half of the things that local authorities do. And as you can see in the bottom right corner, if you don't know which is your local authority, you can scan the QR code, which will send you to a link where you can find out more about which local authority you're in. Many services that councils run are what we call mandatory or statutory, and this means that by law, councils must run these services. So, such as schools, social care, homelessness prevention, food hygiene inspections for cafes and takeaways, rubbish collection, recycling, and just as a couple of examples. Um, a lot of council work is done in collaboration with others, including members of the community, the police, and the NHS. And councils receive their funding from the Scottish Government, and they also generate their own income through council tax and other agreed taxes. And and that funding is used to fund the council services and staff. So I think next slide, please. And now on to what does a councillor specifically does. There is no set job description for a councillor. There are certain meetings that you're expected to attend, but beyond that, the role is largely up to you and your party, if you represent one, to shape as you see fit. Much of the day-to-day work of a councillor takes place outside of formal meetings. Councillors serve and represent the community, for example, by responding to issues from local people and keeping the community informed about local issues and events. Some key roles that councillors in Scotland will take responsibility for, again, are on the screen. I'll just go through quickly. Helping residents with queries and issues. This is called casework. This could be, for example, talking to constituents by phone, emails, letters, social media, home visits, drop-in sessions, street or community meetings, and local events. Other responsibilities include keeping in touch with the community to understand local needs and new ideas, preparing for formal council meetings by reading reports and considering what to do about plans and issues, attending council meetings to represent local people's views and needs, debating key issues and voting, and making decisions and monitoring the work once it begins. Again, councillors work collaboratively with local organisations, police, health partners, and businesses, as well as help to make plans and take decisions to shape the future of the local area. As a councillor, no 2 days are the same. Being a councillor is all about giving back to your community, bringing your energy, hardworking attitude, really getting stuck in and making a difference to local people and to wider society. Research from Cllr shows that over half of councillors spend at least 26 hours per week on formal council duties, with many spending more than 16 hours on informal tasks, such as responding to constituents or preparing for meetings. Being a councillor is the most flexible of any paid elected role, with the absolute minimum requirement tending to be attending the 2 full council meetings a year. The role of a councillor varies depending on what kind of council you're a member of, whether you're in the administration, which means you're running the council, or if you're an opposition group, and whether you hold a portfolio or if you're a ward councillor. Councillors have the benefit of having ward colleagues, making it possible to share responsibilities and to avoid duplicating each other's work. Councillors may also have 1 or 2 partners from the same party as them, but there's usually a mix of parties, and also independents are represented. So being able to work cross-party really is an essential skill for councillors. Elector has a fantastic guide and course which will be shared with you afterwards, which has all of this information and even more detail. But I think the best way to learn about the role is to speak to women who are already doing it. So with no further ado, let's chat now with our 2 fantastic guest speakers. So first off, I'd like to welcome Bailey Dr. Soryia Siddique. Bailey Dr. Soryia Siddique was elected in 2012 to represent Southside Central for Scottish Labour on Glasgow City Council. She chairs the Operational Performance and Delivery Scrutiny Committee, Southside Central Area Partnership and City Administration Committee. She was previously Glasgow's Labour deputy. Dr. Shreya also has a PhD in cancer research. She grew up in Anderston in Glasgow and has always been a strong advocate for more women from minoritized communities to enter politics. So, welcome. It's so great to have you. Such a great background that you have, both with the academic background and with your experience within local politics. And I just thought it would be great if we started, if you could just tell us a little bit more about what you were doing before you were elected as a councillor, and to perhaps map that journey from when you decided to become politically active to when you decided, oh, I'd quite like to run for elected office.
Hi, thank you very much. Thank you, Alexa, for inviting me along. Can you hear me? Yeah. Just to clarify, so I do chair the Operational Performance Delivery Security Committee. I was previously, when Labour was in administration, chairing the Southside Central Area Partnership. And the Council Administration Committee is actually chaired by the leader of the administration. So before I was elected, just to give a bit of background, I did a PhD in drug delivery systems for cancer. I worked in industry and I was working full time in further education, and the college I was working on also was higher education as well. So it was very much kind of, full time permanent job. I'd done kind of a bit of contracting before that with kind of temporary work. So it was quite kind of, it took a while to kind of get from doing my PhD to actually getting a full time job. Just, and I was quite pleased as a full time job. Could get onto the property ladder and live a bit of a normal life because I'd been a student for so long. So I had absolutely no plans of had no plans of becoming a politician or standing for election, though I was very active politically in the sense that I would campaign for, local councillors. I would campaign for MSP candidates, quite happy to campaign for MPs and MP candidates. But was I want to be a candidate or to stand election? No, absolutely not. Not part of my trajectory or plan at all. So what actually happened was that while I was I was quite a regular campaigner for over about a decade, and people were saying to me like, "Oh, have you thought about standing?" And I was like, "No, not for me." But I remember like the specific time when they were in 2012 where they started to advertise, and someone tweeted it on social media. That this is the last few days left if you want to stand for council. And I thought, oh, there's another council election coming up and so forth, and not thinking at all like would I do it. And I was sharing it with us, like people that I know in the party scene, and I was actually encouraging other women to stand. I was like, oh, I don't know if you've seen this, I hope you're thinking of standing. And a few of them said to me, what about you? I think you should put yourself forward, and why would you not, blah, blah, blah. And I kind of thought, I was always like, not really. And then I kind of, I've got a couple of messages and I still remember it thinking, oh, maybe I'll go for the interview and see how I get along. I don't think it's for me, but I'll go through it. But it was like, getting women saying, put yourself forward. Put yourself forward. I wasn't expecting to get an interview, or I got the interview, went along for it. I never told anyone that, I'll put myself forward. And then suddenly, like, it was quite a new process for me. I was expecting, like, when you go for a job and you apply, you go for the interview, then you get an email saying to you, or a letter saying, well, you've been successful or not. The way I learned whether I was successful or not was in the press. I was in the local paper to say I was part of some, I don't know, I think the party at that point was doing a refresh, if I want to call it that, maybe that's diplomatically. And I was part of some kind of refresh, and I was a new blood that was coming in, and I was like, oh my goodness, I haven't discussed this with any of my family, and my family are now going to read about me, put myself forward to be a councillor and students, and my employer, like, how do I was like, oh, I had to quickly send messages and make calls. But so that was the kind of journey for me, and I feel like kind of I went into it kind of going, oh, okay, maybe I'll try, but not really expecting much. And then suddenly, before you know, I'm in the press, and I almost felt like I was tied in. And then stood for selection, and there was quite a bit of negativity in 2012 around me standing because of her headscarf, and I was like, oh, well, she's not going to get elected, this seat's going to get wasted. And she's a bit of a test case, but I don't. Some people are saying it's not a very good test case, we're going to lose the seat, and blah blah blah. And then I think it kind of got me. I don't know if it's my stubbornness to say, wait a minute here, whoa, this is an injustice to even suggest it. Like, how dare you judge me by how I dress? So I was almost like, I need to do this. I need to do this. We're in the 20th century, come on, I need to do this. So then I got elected, and here I am.
It's really really fascinating to hear like this whole journey. And like a couple of things that really stuck out to me in particular was in regards to like you're sending like, oh, you should be a counselor to other people, and then those women are then being like, oh, like maybe like why haven't you considered it? And just like that, I think it really points to that importance of like kind of sisterhood and kind of empowering each other. Like sometimes other people's, and especially other women, see things that you don't see yourself. Like you might maybe know it in the back of your head, but until somebody else actually vocalizes it. So that's really important. And also the whole point about like, some people having doubts about you wearing your headscarf or like being a certain way. I mean, it links to a question I'll probably ask later around like misogyny and like racism and stuff. But I think it's really good to show that people might have their doubts, but it's not to say that you can't do it and you can't like be yourself authentically and still do well in these roles.
Absolutely, yeah. And there will be, there's so much that women put themselves forward for election experience, and it can be a lot. There's positivity as well. You do meet some amazing sisters and brothers, and the kind of sisterhood and the support does get you through it. But there's also negativity as well. That's the reality of it, and women shouldn't be put off by that. I know it's hard, there's absolutely no doubt, but having a strong network round about you, and I have to say my family's been, if it wasn't for my family, I think, and a few kind of core friends are actually people that I met in the political environment that have been just, God, I couldn't have done it without them. And I look back and I think, my goodness, there's really tough times that just having that kind of network of family and friends that are there for you, it's so important.
And network is key, definitely. And we'll probably, well, again, it's something that we'll probably touch on later throughout this call as well. But I really want to know, so you weren't like, you had not initially considered yourself to be a counselor, and now suddenly like you've put yourself out for selection, you've won in the election. And I don't know what kind of like what you had anticipated being a counselor was like, but then when you first became a counselor, how did the reality match up with what you anticipated? Same, different?
To be honest, very different. So I had a full-time permanent job, and I was taking certain classes. I was teaching like different levels of chemistry and science and HNC and so forth. So full timetable, kind of Monday to Friday, and sometimes I think with education as well, you're doing a lot of marking in the week, during the evenings and the weekends and so forth. So pretty much quite a kind of busy time during term and then having the summer breaks and Easter breaks and so forth. So when I got elected, we were in administration, the party that Labour was in administration. So with that becomes a certain amount of responsibility to chair certain meetings, to so forth, and depending on the kind of dynamic of the group and what policy roles and responsibilities. And so I was like the chair of the area partnership in 2012. I was so many different committees. I was the chair of the education committee, and the full council meetings, and then there was all the meetings that were happening in the local community. And the area I represent was in fact, the facts are that a few years ago it was recognised as one of the areas in the whole of the UK with certain part of it where the children are in the most poverty. You can just imagine how challenging it is in terms of the needs and of the area. So very, very demanding in terms of casework, evening meetings and chairs and so forth. So I remember going to my boss and saying, look, I'm now elected and I'll need every 6 weeks I'll be going to the council meeting. Every few weeks I'll be chairing this meeting. So this is my timetable and I'll not be able to do that. And she said, well, and further education at that point was going through kind of cuts as well and a lot of pressures and stuff. And she says, look, you're either going to take this whole module or you kind of, we don't have that flexibility where we can say, here's a lecture that can fill in for you. What we can offer another lecturer is, here's, a full module. She says, you're either here kind of consistently to build that relationship and teach and so forth, or kind of dipping in and out was going to just not be practical. So I realised very quickly that I couldn't get a full-time permanent job and serve as a councillor. That was quite a difficult decision. I remember I saying to her that I'm going to have to go part-time, and she said, if you've really thought about this, because politics, dynamic says, you can be in one term and the next time you're not elected again, or something can happen, and you're at the mercy of the political environment, can be quite unpredictable. And I remember thinking about it and going, there's no way I could cope with keeping my full-time job and serving as an elected member and chairing committees and so forth. So I made that decision that I was going to go part-time. And to be honest, that was, even going part-time, I found it quite, there was just, maybe it was the way I approached it. I was just like, here's all the things I want to change in the world, and here's my opportunity, and I've got to maximise that opportunity because I might only have 5 years, and I want to change this, I want to change that about education, and oh God, yeah, the whole list of things. So yeah, I have to say it's very different. I didn't realise that it can be quite antisocial hours. So you can sometimes work in the evenings and weekends. Like, on Saturday, I'm going to be going to the Gorbals Fair. Give you one example. It's a great event, lovely event, once a year, really enjoy it. So, at summertime, you get lots of fairs and things. So your weekends can go, and sometimes you have evening meetings like community council. So I definitely think I didn't, it's not comparable to any other job I would say that I've held. So yeah, very different.
So many fascinating reflections, and you've been very efficient as well. You've kind of touched on like other questions I was going to ask you about, like how do you balance it with like other employed work, and then also just like what does a typical week look like? I'm getting the impression that the weeks can be very different and very full on, very busy. But
which I like as well. I have to say, I do like that kind of variety, which I do enjoy that, and I thrive on that as well. But at the same time, yeah, it can be hectic some weeks and a bit calmer on others, and sometimes just out of the blue when you least expect it. Like I've just, there's last week there was a kind of announcement that a glass house is about to close in my ward. So suddenly there's like a right, okay, let's run a campaign on this. Things like that. That you might not have planned like a month ago or 2 months ago, but it's the nature of politics.
Yeah. And if you could go back to 2012 for you when you first started as a councillor, like, is there one thing that you would have wished you'd known like at that time, or anything that you would have done differently, do you think?
I think there's a lot of demands on you. There's a lot of pressure on you, and sometimes I think I look back now and I think sometimes the hardest person, you can be very hard on your own self. You're open to critique from your electorate and the media and so forth, but sometimes you actually, I look back and I think to myself, you've got to be kind to your own self, because you won't necessarily get that in a political environment. You don't always win the campaigns. Sometimes decisions don't always go your way, and it can be quite difficult, and can be quite challenging. And the critique is to be able to separate yourself as a person from the politician and be able to say, well, that's the politician that's been attacked,
Hmm.
rather than me, Soryia, that's been attacked. That's probably taken me years, because it's, not to take things personally, but it can be very difficult. But yeah, to be able to kind of separate that.
It's a really kind of like separating like the professional and not taking it as like a personal attack and just trying to like be kind to yourself and keep pushing through. I mean, it's so much that's been so useful already, and we're going to come back and we're going to be talking more. But I'd really love now to bring in our other guest speaker, Councillor Laura Murtagh.
Hello.
Hello, yes. So welcome to our second guest speaker. Councillor Laura was elected in 2023 to represent Cars, Kinnaird and Trist as an independent on Falkirk Council. She is a member of the Executive and Planning Committees and holds a portfolio position in Education, Sport and Leisure, Public Protection. She is an Equality and Human Rights Champion at Falkirk Council. She was previously elected as an SNP councillor in 2017 before becoming independent. She has also previously been a communications and caseworker for SNP MSP Michelle Thompson. Alongside her role, she has an MA in Scottish history and Celtic civilization, is a part-time writer, poet, and environmentalist. So welcome again, a strong track record there as well. Um, Lots of very interesting bits coming together. And so I'll start with the same question that I posed to Soryia, which is what were you doing before you were elected as a councillor? And again, that journey from deciding to become politically active to becoming an elected representative.
Yeah, I mean it's so funny when like you hear a bio back and you're like, oh yeah, I remember writing those things like years ago about the um I mean I've been elected since 2017, as you say, and I was elected as an SNP member, and before that, like I had a young family at that time, or a growing, family, but my youngest daughter was maybe just sort of in the early stages of primary school, and I had been very, very politically active in my youth and stood for parliament and things like that. I'd stood for council once before. And then I'd taken a really big break out of things to have my family, and my experience in my early years when I was a student and running for parliament and running all these different things was that wasn't compatible for me with having a young family. And so I took that break out of politics, but I know that I regretted that. I don't ever regret the decision to do it, but I regret having to do it because just wasn't the support there at that time in the early 2000s. There was no way I could have done it. And so I was really keen to get back into politics, particularly seeing, the real-time effects, like for my kids in education. I'd sat on parent council for about 7 years by that point, and seeing the difficulties within education, seeing the difficulties within healthcare, particularly for women's health. And yeah, I felt at that point that maybe I could get back into things. So I had been working part-time, running the office as a job share office manager and looking after my kids and running playgroups and all the things that you juggle as a mom. And I thought, you know what, it's time for me to go back and sort of, you know, I wanted to do something in my local authority, like that would actually be impactful and real. So that's why I stood for council.
That's excellent. And you saying about balancing all these different things, a part-time job, parenting responsibilities. So was there anything that you learned from like juggling those various roles that you were able to then apply when you became a counselor? Because that's
Oh
another
yeah.
thing to juggle.
I mean, I think the transferable skills are massive, and I still have on my CV. When you want to like look at the gap that you have in your CV, and I'm like, um, there's a lot of things which are similar between being a parent and being a counsellor. And sometimes the patience that you have to learn as a parent, like, not to immediately turn around and like, it's very frowned upon to, like, if we were to actually say to our children what we thought about them at that precise moment in time, sometimes when they're being the way that they are. So that skill is very much employed in politics, and when it comes to both your colleagues and your opponents, and sometimes the officers involved too. So patience, the ability to just like no 2 days are the same. No 2 days as a parent are the same. You don't know what's going to get thrown at you, and it's that same thing as a counsellor. Being flexible, I mean, anybody who's had to do, the various like planning for whatever bags are required for not just that day and that meal and that like after school activity and the transport and how many different car seats you're going to need for which children and where you're going to need to pick people up at what point, whatever. I mean, that transfers well into politics. It's project management. You know, I think that parents are fantastic project managers, and yeah, I think that all of those skills like are really important and transferable, but listening, empathy, time management, patience, and really, I think as you know, it's this thing we call yourself a service user, but as a real person in a real community using real council services, you know, understanding the difference between what happens on a policy sheet and what you're presented with and actually what the real experience is. And I think women have probably, as we're kind of the biggest users of these services and we're put in that front line. So I think it's really important that I wanted to use my experience to change things, you know, and have that voice in the room. Yeah.
It's really great. And that transferable skills point in particular is like really important because I feel like parenthood and motherhood in particular is already not kind of valued the way it should be, um, like in society or socially or economically. But again, you're just really showing that as well as it being like really important to like raise our children that even within that it is a job in the sense that like the skills that you develop, it can definitely be transferred elsewhere. So definitely not to like undermine those skills or to like see it as like a gap in CV. Like there's
Yeah.
so much development as a person you have that you're still doing. So that's really great to hear. And my next question, I'd love to know like what would you say has been your biggest win so far as a councillor?
Um, I mean, for me, so I'm the Equality and Human Rights Champion for Falkirk Council, which in some ways is a role that I did create that role through bringing, you know, relentlessly bringing these issues about equality and human rights and women's rights to the table, writing motions and showing the deficit that we had in our decision making and how decisions were made on like you know, and where women's voices were, where parents' voice, where young people's voices were, all the things which, you know, when we come to decision making where you need to hear and I probably have, I would think fair to say, completely changed the landscape when particularly in Falkirk, but probably impacted elsewhere as well in terms of the way that we do equality and poverty impact assessments, how how the voices of those with protected characteristics and particularly women, young people, disabled people are heard in decision making to the point where if something doesn't meet, when I first sort of started doing budgets, it was very much like they would do an impact assessment and it really would be a tick box exercise if it was done at all as a legal requirement. And through the years, getting more and more experience, I was really able to say, and last year we were able to say, no, doesn't meet public sector quality due. It's not happening, full stop. And I actually had, it was my name on the budget that went through, and primarily the things which didn't happen. And I was not popular for this amongst the general population in terms of having the highest council tax increase in Scotland ever. But what it meant was the people who need the service users who needed those services protected, both the women, the children, the autistic children, the children who were, you know, disadvantaged and out of education, because it didn't meet the proposals didn't meet public sector equality duty and they couldn't demonstrate it, the council couldn't do it. And that shock, it's not just that decision, but that shock has changed the way because of that threat, because of that, no, if you don't do this properly, we just won't be doing your proposals. And so it's changed how departments have had to work together. And overall, I think that's a really, really good thing. But it also reverberated across a lot of the other councils because they saw what happened in Falkirk. And they saw that happened because of the equality situation. So yeah, I suppose from a personal point of view, that's a big win for me to have that impact, and I'm very proud of that. Not so proud of all the hate mail that I got after it, but you know, it was a really good thing to do. But I think probably it's like you get big wins and small wins. Last week, I got a ramp for a family who they've just been the man's been diagnosed with MND, and the woman and he can't speak anymore, and the woman's main care, and that's a really like I got it turned around really quickly. And for me, that is like, I know how much of a difference that's going to make in that person's life. that's massive, so that that person can still get out. And I feel like that impact is as much in the small things as much as doing the big structural things. And I'm sure my daughter would say the fact of banning or making blazers at high schools and at schools across Falkirk non-mandatory and getting rid of that policy. She loves me for that. Things like that. So, you know, but I think it's sort of the small things, but also the big things. So, you know, you get sometimes somebody who you've helped coming back to you and saying, thank you, you've made this difference, can be the thing that it just makes your whole year, you know, it's so impactful, you know. So
It's really nice to hear about both like how much you value both like those big wins in terms of like the structural, and that's really good, like that kind of like making those changes at the system level in terms of like how they go about like kind of like making policy, making sure it complies with like equality duties, and how that's kind of reverberated, as you say, amongst other councils as well. Like that's really fantastic. But then also those kind of very immediate, like this is going to help this family or like this person, like that's just it. I think that's really cool, just like how kind of big and small, like kind of small in quote, because like I feel like it's still important.
yeah,
Like it's not to diminish the importance of it.
yeah.
So I think now actually if there's anyone in the audience that has any questions for Laura, for Soryia, yeah, we both highlighted now. Like if anybody wants to ask any questions, you can either write it in the chat or you can raise your hand and unmute yourself. Or if not, it's okay, because I do have more questions that I can ask to both of you. Shall I do that?
Sure.
Yeah, so I think um something that like both of you like mentioned like throughout when you've been speaking is like kind of how you deal with kind of like that. Oh, we've got some questions. Oh, that's excellent because one of the questions in the chat is actually a question that I was trying to formulate in my head right now. So I'll go with Shamella's question first, which is how do you cope and deal with abuse and or hate? Has it ever made you think about stopping being an elected member? That was basically the question. So that's Shamella's asked that.
um I don't know who's going first, but the honest answer to that second, but has it ever made me think about stopping being an elected member? Yes, it has. And you know, there's no matter what you do, because I think this is the thing that, you know, would say you can't do everything and you please everyone, and that's probably one of the first lessons you need to accept. You will annoy people, and I think that in the landscape, we all know the kind of different changing landscape that we've got in public discourse. It can get really, really vicious, and like I say, I've had quite a lot of abuse over that council tax rise, but also over anti-racism stuff, anti-fascism stuff recently, and it can get very personal. Um, and I think that the way that I've coped with it is, and the way I've coped, to be honest, with most things as a counsellor, is really understanding the importance of having networks to support you. And I would have quit so long ago, had it not been for that. And knowing that there are women and also men, you know, but you get networks and you come together where you can just talk about the same, you know, you're going through the same things in different councils. And I think that's so important to you know, I've really benefited from that. I think also though, having good relationships with officers in your council, and realizing that you need those and you need to be able to trust your officers. So you know, sometimes things can get political, or even within your own groups, you don't want to go and say to somebody, or you know, your group leader maybe. So having a really trusted relationship with senior officers and in governance is really important. And I'm going to give a punt to David here as well, that on occasion when I've had difficulties where I needed advice, or I wasn't sure about something, I've gone to improvement service. I've literally sent David an email and said, I'm not sure about this. Can we have a chat? And you know, I'm really grateful for the time that David's made for when that's kind of been needed. Because you're just not going to know anything, and I think that's one of the things. It's just having that support network and giving yourself the time, you know, that you need out as well. If you need to take a break, you take a break. Um, you know, so I think, yeah, there's lots of things I could say on that topic, but I think I'm still here and I'm still advocating for people to join. because I still think it's important, but sometimes you're going to have those moments, and the network around you is so crucial.
Soryia, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think Laura's covered it very well, but I would say, yeah, I would agree that there has been points when I thought, my goodness, why am I doing this? Like, I never expected it to be. Sometimes it is very brutal, especially the last few years in terms of the divisiveness, the hate, the racism, and just the political rhetoric has changed so much since 2012. And certain like voices in that space are so divisive. The language is very dehumanizing, and people are being scapegoated, and I don't know if they're aware of or how seriously they take the fact that it has an impact on communities. And it's trying to balance that between, because I represent a very diverse ward. So communities or parents are coming to me and saying, this is happening, my child's, experienced this is happened, and so forth. And it's getting that balance between when you experience it yourself as well, and you're advocating for people, and it's that balance between you also keeping yourself safe as well. And I guess I have to question as well whether the policies and that exist currently have kept up to date when it comes to safety and keeping elected members and communities safe. Because what existed in 2012, and I mean that for all political parties, just speak to women and colleagues and seeing what they're experiencing, I think there probably needs to be, maybe these policies and procedures and support networks need to evolve with the kind of emerging challenges that we're experiencing. But, good support networks, and actually keep pushing, because, the experiences that we're having and that I've had is pushed me to do a motion on women's safety. And we've brought kind of changes within the city council. Glasgow City Council is the largest local authority. There's now safety alarms. There's more support for elected members because there's a recognition of that changing dynamic.
Thank you so much for both of you. And like we keep coming back to that idea of networks and like finding that that solidarity. I think that's so important. And just like trying to like find some way to kind of like keep on that even in like racism, like fascism, like all of this, like you have to try and find a way to keep going. Otherwise, those bad forces just continue. So yeah, thank you for continuing with your work and for all the insights this evening so far. I'll go to the other questions in the chat now. So we have from Samantha. Would you advise looking into part-time work in advance of standing?
I mean,
Either of you can go.
I was doing so. I think this is where experience, and probably like I kind of wish I'd maybe spoken more to people in the job before I did it. I was working part-time, and I basically almost swapped one for the other when I first became a councillor. And because I thought a bit, like I thought I'll never be able to do this. I'll never be able to do the two. There was like a little thing in my mind that thought, oh, maybe I'll be able to do it, and then it just became really clear that I couldn't, or like as I was doing it. And then in my second term, I have worked part time, and I have juggled it. And at that time, I was the education portfolio holder, which I'm no longer. So it was a really really full on job, and I think it is that thing that it is possible. It is possible to do it. And I would have been stronger if I'd known that, I'd be more insistent with my employer. I'd be more insistent about what rights I had and about them helping me to make it work. And I probably gave up too early, if you know what I mean, like because I thought I'll never be able to juggle it all. But that's because I didn't learn early enough how to say no. Like right now I could be at two other events just now. I should be at a sports awards thing for Larver High or whatever, and something else for the charity that I helped to run. And you could be at something every night of the week. You'd be two or three things every night of the week and every weekend and whatever, and you can't do it, but you don't want to say no at the beginning. You want to be all things to all people. So in terms of work, if the income is essential to you, then I think you have to be saying, do you know what? No, I can do it, but you need to have those conversations with your employer. So I think some people do manage to do it full time, and I think particularly it seems that men manage to do full-time jobs and be a councillor a lot easier than women. But it's the cultural thing, and I would say it's a lot easier when a man says, "Oh, can I get, can I move this meeting because I have to have a meeting on this?" That's okay. But when you say, "Can I move this meeting because I have to go on a school run or whatever?" It's like, "Oh no, absolutely not." So I think, yeah, I would say I'm now just being made redundant from my Parliament assistant job and probably finding it a bit tough from an income perspective on the longer term. So yeah, I think it does help to work part-time if you can, and also because it forces you to structure, not just do everything as a councillor all the time, because you have to have those other hours. So yeah, I would say so.
Makes you prioritize and like really think
Yeah,
about
it
what's most important.
forces you.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Laura. I would totally agree with you. I think at the beginning I was just like, oh my God, my boss said, and I'm going to have to give up this, I'm going to have to give up that. And I think I wasn't very good at, you've got to set your boundaries. And it's hard saying no at the beginning because you're just, everybody's, especially as a new councillor as well. I think there's so many groups want to meet you and you're going to, understand the area. So, later on it does become, you become more familiar with the dynamics and how you balance it and actually setting the boundaries and not feel guilty about saying, no, I can't attend that. Sometimes that's hard because you're thinking, oh gosh, but then, you've balancing care duties and so forth. But I also know counsellors who work full time and have so from the onset. I personally don't know how they do it, but they do it, and some people do part time. And it does depend also on your employer. And I've seen David's put a link in the chat. I wish I had known of that before. I will have a look at that. But that kind of, this is me. I'm stood for election. I'm elected, and these are my rights, my parameters, and coming to that kind of middle ground with your employer. But yeah, some people do. Some people seem to balance it, and some people do. Are counsellors full time.
I can see we've got another question in chat. So we've got two more questions. We've got 10 minutes, and let's try and see if we can get through these. So first off, we have a question from GM. It says, "Can you give us a bit more details on how was the campaign for you? How much time did you spend on it?"
When I first did election, that was in 2012. I was actually able to balance my campaigning and do my full time job at that point. I was doing I was campaigning on the weekends. I was campaigning after work, and I did take some time off, but I was able to do it. It was very exhausting, but I was able to do it, and I think I found ways to kind of make it happen. I didn't have to, I think probably the way the holidays turned out in my kind of workplace, just Easter holidays and things, it was just perfect timing for me. But I managed to keep the full time job going as well as being, campaigning. And campaigning to change so much. It is face to face, absolutely. It's chapping doors, is speaking on the phone. You can formulate a campaign, team that they could be at times that you can, and you're at certain times that others can't be out. There's online campaigns as well. There's social media ads. So it's such an evolving area. So yes, I think it's possible to balance it while you're working.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'd agree.
Laura?
Yeah, I think I when I first stood, I was working part time, as I said, and I had the kids, and I think it's like the job. You could do as much campaigning, you could never do too much, but um, doing a little bit probably each day, and that you're going to be out, a good few evenings a week, and things at weekends, like, and especially in the short campaign, you are. But I mean, um, you just have to fit it around, and it will. It's like, decide what your boundaries are, and if you've got a campaign team, you sort of say, look, I can only do this. You'd be really clear. I can only do this in this way. And also setting yourself really clear social media boundaries, because social media can take over your life and you can think you have to respond to everything and comments. And that's like, no, do a course on how on social media before you do a short campaign or anything, to understand, what support you should need and what kind of things are productive in your time, and when you should just shut off, and So yeah, it's a kind of working smart, and not letting it take over everything. But yeah, planning and support is important.
It's great. So work smart and you can make it work around like other commitments. It's exhausting but doable. That's what I'm getting from both of you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
David, I can see you've raised your hand.
Yeah, just a plea from me. Please, as much as you want to spend a lot of time on your campaign and you might want to use leave, do keep some annual leave back perhaps for the heavy induction period straight after the election, or at least make sure you keep some energy when for once you do get elected fully. A number of councillors have told me that they just burned themselves out in the campaign, and then when they were elected, they didn't have any energy or annual leave to actually then, spend that first a few weeks really getting to grips with it, and they regretted that. So please for me, do keep some energy and annual leave perhaps for that period after you get elected.
Good point.
Thank you so much, David. That's really important. Yeah, and I'll move on. I'll move us on to our final question, which is from Alison, and it's a question for you, Laura. Laura, you've been a councillor as an independent and also with a party. Which one did you prefer and feel more supported by?
Now, I promised to be honest, didn't I? So that's yeah, that's a difficult question. I'm gonna do that typical politician thing. There are ups and downs of both, and I absolutely like I had been in the political party for like 25 years, and I when I left it was a difficult decision. In terms of being supported, what I would say is that I although it's made a tricky situation locally, because obviously I've left the local group and they're still there and I'm now in opposition. I didn't lose my national support network. I was previously the sort of national women and equalities convener for the party for councillors, and I ran some support groups, and I kind of pretty much still run those support groups just without the name of the party in front of them. And that network of people that built up, and I gained new people and new colleagues that were more prepared to come and speak to me because of that, and new relationships. So, um, I think that probably in terms of which I've enjoyed more, I probably have enjoyed being an independent more because I can do more stuff in a with a sort of freedom way, and I can kind of pursue things in that way. I don't think it's for everyone. Like, I don't think that everyone is suited to being an independent, and I don't think that everybody is suited to being in a group. And maybe time and experience tells with that. But I think everybody is essential, and both are essential. Like, I can see the value absolutely in the party system. But I think that one thing that's so important in local politics, and particularly in local politics, is that what happens is that if I'm like, I can literally go to 4 local authorities from here, like from where I'm sitting. I'm in Falkirk, but I can go over the Kincardine Bridge to Fife, and the Clip Bridge to Clip, and I can walk to Stirling that way. And an SNP administration here might propose option A for our policy, and the Labour option B, and then Clip over the water, it might be the other way around. And it's completely different. And sometimes it makes absolutely no sense in terms of, then you say, oh well, they're like, bash whatever it is. It doesn't make any sense. Local politics, local decision making is often about what's best for your community. And the more that we can work to get the best for our communities, and the less partisan we can be in local politics, the better. And I think that, as much as I think that having some sort of mindset of, working with people, like, you're gonna, like, I agree with David wholeheartedly. The most important time is doing those trainings. Do every training you can, everything the improvement service offer you, everything your officers offer you. Even if it doesn't make sense at the time, it will later in your term help you massively. But also because that's where you're going to build your connections, and you're going to build connections across parties and across boundaries, and those are so valuable. So yeah, I think I have felt supported by my colleagues, but also by officers at different times as well. So yeah, you'll find your support network. I wouldn't say I didn't feel supported in one or the other, but yeah, I probably, being a mischievous person, quite enjoy being independent, if I'm honest.
Something I really appreciate how like a lot of the answers from this evening. So really come back to the idea of like building those networks, building those relationships with other people. I think that's just if that's one thing I'll take away from this session. There's many things I'll take away, but there's one thing in particular, like that idea of networks and solidarity is really important. So thank you to both of you. I realize that we are running a little bit short on time, so we'll try and get through the last bits. It's not too much. I promise we'll give you the rest of your evening back. Let me just scroll down. S- Rosie, would it be better if I did like the kind of resources or if you want to do the kind of reflections?
I think let's just do the evaluation and I can send, we've got loads of amazing resources and I'll send them to all of you via email tomorrow so you can look through them in your own time. But now I'll just launch, we've got a couple of surveys just to hear how you found today and what you think you'll be taking forward from it. So you should have one that comes up on your screen just now.
Yeah, so if you just go ahead and answer those questions, it'll be really good. And also if you have any comments or any reflections, any short reflections from today's session, do feel free to pop it in the chat. Or if there's anything you want to say privately, or if you have a longer message, you can email it to Rosie or to the lector email address that you have. And the answers so far looking very positive. I'm seeing lots of yeses, which is good. This is really good.
And just to say, like, I'm just the same. Like, you can find my details online, like on Falkirk Council, whatever. Like, I'm more than happy to, um, help other women that have got questions or anything. Just send me an email. You can, like I say, you can find me online. You can also find me living rent free in the minds of the fascists of Falkirk, but you know, don't go there in their head. Bad place, bad.
Yeah. And if you're interested to shadow or come along to the council if it's relevant to you and where you might be interested to stand and so forth, then please do get in touch.
Just not a planning committee. Don't go to the planning committee. Never come back.
Actually, we had a lunchtime session as well, and I think one of the participants there said something very similar as well about the planning committee.
Yeah.
This is making me more curious.
I have to say, I actually love planning, which is weird. That is weird. But I think I think if I'm honest, I actually think that we need so many more women. I have been the only woman on the planning committee on more than one occasion. And I think it's a really depressing committee at times. It's quasi judicial, so no party politics involved, and it's it's supposed to be very rules based and law based anyway. But it can sap your soul. It can, and sometimes you could have a 10-minute planning committee meeting, or like last month, it went on to I think probably 4:30. It started at 10 o'clock in the morning. So
No, wow.
yeah, and I will say, I think if I was to give it a tip, I mean, at the beginning, one thing is different between being an independent and being in a group and sort of having my own rules, if you know what I mean, our own standards. I have done, you can do a meeting from home and you know, or you can do a meeting. I've done finished planning committee, quasi judicial planning committee meetings in the car, outside my doors, you know, musical theatre thing, because that's the only option. That was the only option. And I've done those things where I've done it, like I've moved a budget from, you know, having to come home to sit. Like you don't be told no by people. Like you have to like make your circumstances, you know, it's not set up for our circumstances at times, and it's the system that has evolved through patriarchy and through, you know, what was best for those people, and it hasn't really adapted. So I think um I'm quite unapologetic in doing that, and have been quite unapologetic in doing that, because the nicey way just doesn't work. I tried the nice way, so does everybody else. It doesn't work. You've got to make your own decisions and be firm about them, and that's where the network and the allies and the sisterhood come in to back you and you need them because sometimes you have hard moments, but you can juggle those things. You just do it. Seek forgiveness, not permission, is my advice on that.
Well, just, again, so much to take away from that. But thank you so much. And just, I mean, everyone I think has already done the second set of questions about like looking ahead. And again, I'm seeing lots of positive responses. I'm seeing lots of yeses to it, but people feeling motivated, supported, and more like just more, ever more curious and like will and like interested. So that's all really great stuff. So I'm gonna close now. I know give everyone the rest of their evenings, especially our councillors, as we know we've got very jam-packed schedules. But I'd just like to say thank you so much to our guest speakers, to Soryia and Laura, for sharing their experiences so authentically. It was a lot of honesty, not shying away from any of the difficulties, but also bringing that kind of hope and passion as well, which is so incredible. Thank you to David as well for sharing your insights. Thank you for Rosie for dealing with all the tech behind the scenes. And most importantly, thank you to all you participants for coming along, asking really good questions, and just coming along with us on this journey. And be rest assured, like this is not just one and done. This is the beginning of a journey. As I said, Rosie's going to send a whole load of like resources tomorrow that really expand on what started tonight. And we hope it's not the last time that we'll see you at something like this. Because as has been echoed throughout tonight, like politics really needs more women, it needs women like you. And Elector is here. Like we are here to support you on that journey. So have a lovely rest of the evening, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.
Luck, everyone. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.